Welcome to the Predictive World series brought to you by SalesChoice, a company that specializes in ending revenue uncertainty for human advantage. I'm your host, Jennifer Yim, Director of Product and Marketing at SalesChoice, where we bring three offerings to market. Sales Insights, which helps sales professionals meet their sales plans with guided insights. Mood Insights, which helps frontline employees' voices be heard, all powered by AI. And our third offering is AI and Data Science as a Service, designing and building and maintaining AI models with a new line of business on generative AI. Over the years, we've been hosting numerous experts and thought leaders in the fields of AI and revenue growth, building a trove of podcasts, webinars, white papers, and more. Today, I have with us Rakesh Malhotra, co-founder and managing partner at Nuvalence. Rakesh, welcome and pleasure to meet you.
Thanks for having me, Jennifer. Great to be here.
Rakesh, could you tell us a bit about yourself and Nuvalence?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm Rakesh Malhotra. I'm co-founder here at Nuvalence. My background is in product management. So I've spent the better part of 20, almost 25 years building products in a commercial software setting. Started my career for the first 10 years at Microsoft, building a variety of different enterprise products there. In the last decade, I've really been building products in startup world, and most recently here at Nuvalence with AI.
That sounds great. I'll turn it over to Dr. Cindy Gordon to start the conversation.
Thanks, Rakesh, and thanks, Jennifer. It's great to see you, great to meet you, and looking forward to our conversation. Obviously, we both eat AI for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and it seems like it doesn't matter what newspaper you pick up or what you read today. It's just so pervasive. I'm just thrilled, Rakesh, to have you here with us. And it was really interesting to go through your website and see the energy that's around your brand. And so I really wanted to just start with just to share your vision of what you hope you can do. I'm a former Accenture partner, and there's lots of dudes out there, ourselves, yourselves, but how do you see carving out some uniqueness, disrupting the current landscape? But because I can sense you're a visionary, and I'd just love to hear your story on what's going to be different now with AI.
Yeah, great to share some thoughts with you, Cindy. I think, for us as a relatively new consulting firm, one of the things that affords us is the ability to rethink how our services are delivered. So we are not necessarily beholden to traditional models or victims of our success. So we're building a next generation consulting firm that's really focused on building platforms and building AI. I think one thing that's going to change moving forward in professional services is a tighter focus on outcomes rather than hours. Our business has traditionally been, many professional services businesses are typically sold on an hourly basis, which really measures the effort you put in. I think as the effort changes, the amount of effort required changes, clients should naturally focus more on the outcomes that are generated, which will, I think, have the effect of lowering cost, which will also make these professional services more accessible to everybody. Many of us who are lucky enough to maybe have access to medical care and doctors and lawyers or IT professionals, oftentimes those services are only available to people of means. And I think one of the things AI is going to enable is the ability to offer these services to a much broader swath of the population, just in the same way that whether you're in the United States or in some other country around the world, many of us have a supercomputer in our pocket. I think that same type of transformation is about to happen in professional services by making them accessible. So I'm not specifically worried about reducing number of people or reducing the need for human beings. I actually think what AI is going to do is drive higher demand for these services and make them effective and affordable to a larger swath of the population. So I think that's going to be really critical.
Yeah, I really can resonate with your point on outcomes. Particularly in the AI field where, you can spend an inordinate amount of time, not just on the sourcing and the cleansing of the data and then building the model, but then getting the accuracy of the model by different algorithmic methods, right? In terms of this scenario. And, obviously that precision has value to an organization. So this is an area where actually we can be more outcome specific in our contracts, right? That is pretty exciting, or gain sharing, right? But yes, yeah, I don't disagree with you at all in the sense that we need some disruption in the model. So that's really helpful context. Now, obviously, we celebrated a year of OpenAI in February. I had its first year baby anniversary, although I think with your brain, you were well into the large language models and the arena and other generations. But how do you think, this is going to change the landscape in terms of process innovation? And obviously, everybody's waiting for the marketplace. I think I have a friend who's built 30 little chat bots to go on the OpenAI marketplace. But what are your thoughts there on how it's going to change process innovation and entrepreneurs having more access in new ways?
Yeah, I think um, the fact that if you were building a startup or if you were building a company 5 or 10 years ago, or maybe before AWS came in, before these large cloud providers came into place, you had a massive capital infrastructure investment you needed to make before you could get your product and make it available to your customer base. I think as we've evolved, many of these startups are now using, almost all of them are using cloud computing and are not building and buying their own data centers. I think a similar trend is about to happen here with AI, where maybe to start a company, you needed a team of a dozen people or 2 dozen people just to get your first version of your product out to market. You can be able to do that more effectively and more efficiently now with AI co-pilots or whatever type of technology you want to describe that as being. I think it's going to be a really transformational amount of capital that's needed to bring new ideas, new prototypes to market. For us, as we work with our clients and build proof of concepts and ideas, what we might have had time to do one POC or maybe come up with 2 different options or iterations of a design for them in, say, 2 weeks or 4 weeks. Now we can do dozens in the same amount of time. So the amount of choice they have is dramatically expanded. And I think the last thing I'd say on this is, I think because AI does tend to reduce the amount of human cognitive labor involved in specific types of use cases, I think it does mean, at least for our clients, they're focused a little bit less on the process and more on the knowledge. And so what I mean by that is, I'll give a very specific example. We have a client who helps diagnose or helps triage medical incidents. So if you're injured and you're trying to figure out, do I go to the doctor? Do I go to an emergency room? What do I need to do? How urgent is it? They triage this. So typically they're limited by how many nurses they have on staff. And so in such a model, you have to be highly efficient in how many people you see, how you see them, how you prioritize. You have to take all of these decisions in mind, take all these considerations in mind as you build these processes. With AI, they can triage these things with an AI assistant, and efficiency of the model is less important. Instead, coverage, seeing everybody, giving everybody a response, and doing that in a timely manner becomes the high order bit, if you will, rather than the efficiency of the process itself. So an exercise we often ask our clients to do is, how would this process be different if you had unlimited headcount? How would you design it then? And while that's obviously not practical in most cases, it does provide a nice guiding, a true north direction on how you might engineer a process when the access to the cognitive labor again reduces the barrier to efficiency.
Yeah, the that white space moving, you said, to the true North Star and not encumbered. So often we need to really get to the gems. It's unleashing that creativity. So kudos on you. And now, obviously, I saw your Microsoft background, Rakesh. And obviously, we all know in the AI world, Microsoft, first of all, hope you still have a lot of their stock. It's certainly done well. But in terms of their positioning, obviously with the Azure stack, obviously with co-pilots, and also significant investment in OpenAI, are you open to more open architectural approaches? I'm just curious on your journey. Is it that you go into a client and try and just understand their install base? In other words, you pick the right fit for that account, or is your expertise more in one stock, like whether it's Google or whether it's well, maybe not Amazon yet, but they're trying. But thoughts?
Yeah, no, and it's a great point. I mean, I really enjoyed my time at Microsoft. I have a lot of great friends there, and I think what they've done in this space to drive innovation is has been great because it's created momentum across the entire industry. But to answer your question, we use all sorts of different technologies based on what we think is in our client's best interest. Whether that's Microsoft, OpenAI certainly do a ton of work there. Google, AWS. I think most of our clients, what we're advising our clients is saying, hey, make sure interoperability of different technology stacks is something you consider in your architecture. We're way too early for standards and things like that. But I don't think certainly I'm not smart enough to predict a year from now who's going to have the lead or the lead in a specific domain or in a specific vertical. And so preserving optionality to enable the ability to incorporate different technologies from different vendors is important. And I think even Microsoft would say the same thing. They're embracing open source models and running all sorts of different AI workloads on their cloud, and the other cloud providers are taking the same tack. So I think they all recognize that this is going to be a fragmented space, and the innovation is always a little bit messy up front until the dust settles.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the interoperability heart drumbeat never seems to end, right? I think part of it, it's also looking at the consolidation opportunities, right? So I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of that rationalization, especially with, as you put in, machine learning ops infrastructure and the costs that can be associated if they don't, get into some better lineage. Obviously, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about AI data bias, and obviously copyright law with the LLMs. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with, the New York, let's say the New York Times, right? With the legal case. But which approaches are you taking in AI data bias? And one is, picking modernized tools that can go in and inspect whether you're using the IBM 360 or Google has some good toolkits, I know. Or are you finding that you need to find more synthetic data, or especially when you get into the healthcare sector, right, where the risks are very significant. But I'm just curious on your approach on data bias, and if there's any toolkits you can recommend to say, hey, if you have to choose between this and this, then you should use X. I'm sure our viewers would love to know that.
Yeah, great question. I think, really it just starts with, I think there's all sorts of different ways bias can enter AI, whether it's in the algorithm, whether it's in the data, whether it's in interpretation of that data. So it's a complicated area. I think step one is understanding, what our clients are trying to do upfront is understanding where their data sets and their training data may create opportunities for bias. So it really starts at the ingestion of the data and the training information that's being provided. I think observability and monitoring is also really important here. So like transparency. What's I think many of our clients find as both magical and disconcerting is that you can often get non-deterministic outcomes with AI, and so it's hard to repeat. You can ask the same question twice and get different answers depending on the context and the data that has been put through. And so, like Google has a what if tool, for example, that allows you to go and and understand how your models would react with hypothetical data and different data sets to understand where you might be able to have pockets of bias that you can't otherwise see. You mentioned the IBM toolkit, which is another one. Microsoft also has a toolkit. Most of the cloud providers have toolkits for identifying and compensating or dealing with bias in the models. Compensation is one thing we often see as well. So when your model is going to produce a specific bias, you can compensate for the outcome after the fact. We've seen this in science and physics and math for hundreds of years, right? Like where you measure something and it's not quite right, and so you add a constant to it, and then it turns out it's right. And so while that's maybe not as reassuring as removing bias or eliminating it, I think some of those compensation models help as well. And then the last thing I'd say is I think just knowing that you have a bias and understanding where that sits and being able to, you're never going to be able to eliminate it any more than human beings can eliminate bias in their understanding, but recognizing that it's there, observing it, monitoring it, the actual decisions an AI makes in every platform we build, all that stuff's audited as well. So the decisions the AI makes itself becomes the data set that we're then evaluating on for bias as well. So this observability, tracing, monitoring, transparency, I think is really the foundation of understanding how bias comes into play and then being able to deal with it. And it really varies. In some cases, the bias might be catastrophic or terrible for the outcome. In some cases, it might be benign based on the type of use case you're having. So it's hard to have a one size fits all, but it's something that every one of our clients, either for good business reasons or upcoming regulatory reasons, is considering as top of mind.
Yeah, I think a future episode just to probe into this topic, because I know we could have a much deeper conversation than we can than today, Rakesh. I think the one maybe just added variable here is the fact that we train on historical data that's already biased and may not want to create the future world. And I think that those conversations are very important on the design. Because AI will always spit out, the realities of the historical context unless you feed it something different. So, that to me is one of the worries, is not taking the time to ensure that we're thinking about the future world, to your earlier point, that you want to create, right? And then and I think you nailed it when you said that, like the clarity of that future, then it allows you to look at what you have to enable that journey. But yes, I find this topic really interesting, and just slowing people down to have this discovery conversation, right? Because everybody so often wants to get on with it, right? Especially the engineers.
Yeah, well, one thing I do find, I agree with everything you just said, and I think as more of the content that's generated even on the web is AI generated itself, which is then reused to retrain the AI. Like, I don't think anybody fully understands exactly what that impact will be. But
Yes.
to your New York Times point earlier, I do feel that, like, human generated content with unique value becomes even more valuable in a world with AI. I don't think less. And I know there's a bunch of debate happening: is does an LLM reduce the value of a journalist article, or increase it? I feel like authentically generated content is going to be really important. Not unlike organic. I use a term around here, like there's gonna be organic information, right? Just like there's organic food, there's organic. The more artificial stuff that gets created, the organic version of those things tend to become more valuable and more desirable. So, but we'll see how it all plays out.
Yep, for sure. Definitely the safeguards are hopefully coming, how we monitor that and ensure it. That's another discussion in itself. I spend a lot of my time, Rakesh, talking, and probably like you, to CEOs, but increasingly more to board directors as well. And what are the things you think we're doing right now in the AI arena, and what things do you think are really wrong that, just you want to say, if you're a CEO, these are three things, or board directors, I'd recommend you get right. I'd just love to hear your closing remarks on kind of moving us in the right direction.
Yeah, I think I'm by nature just optimistic about things. And I know people are at different ends of the spectrum around AI. I think it's inevitable, and so the boards and the CEOs, I think, that are leaning forward and into this, experimenting, understanding it with their own data within their own organization, understand how it impacts their business. You have to start experimenting and building with this stuff, and every organization is unique. So I think if you're trying to be a fast follower in this space, you do risk, you have serious business risk that comes with that. On the other side, many of the boards and CEOs I talk to see AI itself as a risk as well, and that's a reasonable stance to have, right? And whether it's data privacy, we've talked about bias and all these other things that come into play. The analogy I've used before is like, with cybersecurity and cyber threats, you can use AI to combat these risks as well. And so, even though there's risk of bias, there's risk of privacy leaks, there's all these other risks, AI will actually be used to mitigate some of that, as well. And I think that's going to be really, really important. I think, like the computer itself, AI is unique in that it's not only a product that's being delivered to the market, it's actually a product that's being used to deliver those products to market as well, right? And so, like, almost every product we use today has a computer in it, but then you use computers to build those products as well. So it's a means of production as well as the delivered product. So I think that's something that all organizations are really trying to deeply understand and internalize, and what that means. So most of our clients, where we tell people a great place to start is use AI for yourself within your own organization to help make your team more effective, more efficient. That way you can learn, maybe before you project some of these capabilities out to your customers, where you're a little bit more worried about what they might see or what the AI might do. It allows you to learn with a friendly audience, one that will be able to hopefully help you then, kind of, it's like the dog fooding your own technology first. It allows you to more intelligently understand how it might impact your customers. And so being cautious, I think, is reasonable, but it should not be an excuse to either block or put the brakes on any type of innovation with AI, because I think there's a real risk you get left behind.
Yeah, there's nothing better than adults having the opportunity to get their own hands into the cookie jar, right? Because that's how adults learn. They learn by doing, right? And you're absolutely right. The need to use these tools and to learn, and that's one of the things certainly with Chat GPT, right? Where everybody's been downloading it to their cell phone and experimenting. And I was out not too long ago with the chairman of a company, and he just loved the fact he could get coaching tips on how to golf better. So it was just kind of funny, right?
Yeah, it's weird. I found one, every time there's this massive technological shift in our industry, I find you find a technology that equally captivates the CEO and the engineering or the developer in your organization, they're equally captivated by it. You have something very interesting. And, the iPhone did this, BlackBerry did this, the internet itself was like this. But there aren't that many technologies that have equal resonance on both of those, personas. And so whenever my experience is when that happens, you really need to pay attention because something major is underway. And I think we're obviously preaching. I'm obviously preaching to the choir here, but I think that this is a really important moment for our industry and how we operate in the business context overall.
Thanks, Rakesh. What a great way to close our conversation out. Just thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to pass things back to Jennifer with her closing comments. But yes, you nailed it.
Thanks, Cindy. Enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks, Rakesh, for joining us for the Predictive World series by SalesChoice, and join us next time for more insights on the AI world.